Hello, everybody, and welcome to Lovefraud Live. In the third episode of the Showtime documentary Lovefraud, the con man who swindled multiple women, Richard Scott Smith, reveals that he comes from a broken family. The show also interviews 3 other of his family members. It appears to be an attempt to explain why the guy does what he does. But tonight, I'll go into far more detail. I'm Donna Anderson, author of Lovefraud.com, and tonight our topic is Explaining Sociopaths, Nature and Nurture. This is a live streaming show, and I'll answer your questions at the end of this short presentation, so please send them to me as we go along. Now, I'm not affiliated with the Lovefraud documentary, so I'm watching it on TV along with you. Several people interviewed in the show have said that Smith is a sociopath or psychopath. I'd say that they're probably right. So, how did he get this way? This episode includes a voice recording of Smith explaining his broken family, his alcoholic father who divorced his mother, remarried multiple times, had more kids, and neglected him. Smith says one of his stepmothers beat him. Is all of this true? Possibly. The previous episode of the show also presented another of Smith's voice recordings. This time, he said his mother told him that he was lazy, stupid, worthless, and would never amount to anything. Was this true? Possibly. Smith certainly could have been telling the truth. He also could have been making the stories up. But he definitely used them to try and make the targeted women feel sorry for him. The show interviewed Smith's aunt, who did say that his mother basically abandoned him and he was raised by his grandparents. And then, when he was 9 years old, Smith's mother showed up and ran off with him. No one knew where he was or how he was being treated. If Smith's parents neglected and berated him the way he said they did, then they may have been disordered. If so, I'm sure that Richard Scott Smith was affected. But his childhood experiences may not totally explain his behavior as an adult. So let me provide some background information. Here's the key concept. Psychopathy is highly genetic. That means a child can be born with a predisposition to develop the personality disorder. Research shows that whether or not a child actually does become a psychopath is about 50% due to heredity. Now, genetics, of course, are a crapshoot, so a child may or may not get the genes for disorder. In fact, a child is more likely to inherit the genes when it's the mother who is psychopathic rather than the father. But genetics do not tell the whole story. Psychopathy results from the interaction between nature and nurture. Whether this disorder actually does develop is also due to the parenting a child receives and the environment that a child grows up in. So, if someone is born with a genetic risk of psychopathy, it usually means that one or both of the parents are disordered, or there is disorder somewhere on the family tree. Psychopaths make terrible parents. Some of them engage in outright abuse, physically beating or injuring their children, and some of them engage in sexual molestation. Many are neglectful. But even if psychopaths don't engage in obvious physical abuse, they usually inflict psychological and emotional harm. They lie to kids, break their promises, and keep changing the rules. The parent may say something and then insist that the words were never spoken, and this has the effect of distorting a child's sense of reality. Psychopaths do not love their children. They are incapable of loving their children, just as they are incapable of loving anyone else. They are not concerned about children growing up to be healthy, productive members of society. In fact, psychopaths usually look at their children as possessions, like a car or a flat-screen TV. Or they may view a child as a mini-me, an extension of themselves. Or they may use the children as clubs to torment the other parent. The net result is that a child of a psychopath grows up in a very unstable environment. If the child has also inherited the genes for psychopathy, chances are good that he or she will develop the disorder. If the child has not inherited the genes, he or she may develop other psychological issues, such as anxiety or depression, simply because of trying to survive the stress of his growing up environment. It may be possible, with extremely attentive parenting, to prevent psychopathy from developing in an at-risk child, or to at least mitigate it. In this case, parents must teach their children love, empathy, and impulse control. Do psychopathic parents do this? No. They will not bother to instill love, empathy, and impulse control in the child. They can't teach what they don't know. I've spoken to many parents who are horrified to realize that they've had a child with someone who is disordered. And even when these parents do their best to raise an at-risk child well, sometimes it doesn't work. Sometimes the genetics are so strong that the best parenting in the world cannot overcome an inborn predisposition towards a personality disorder. Some kids are simply born bad. So, what happened to Richard Scott Smith, the con man star of the Love Fraud show? Well, his aunt said that she didn't see him for 27 years, and then he showed up and wanted to be part of a family. So he said. Actually, what he did was he swindled her. Smith also tried to put her brother, who had a brain condition after serving in Vietnam, in a home, and then steal his home. The show also interviewed Smith's sister. When she was 12 and he was 10 years older, their mother died, and she moved in with him. But Smith actually claimed that his sister was his daughter and used her as a tool to take advantage of women. Smith belittled the girl and eventually became violent towards her. The sister is hiding from Richard Scott Smith. She said in an interview, "I don't want to live with a monster in my life." So, according to his family members, Richard Scott Smith was abusive and taking advantage of women from at least the age of 22. This was how this man lived his life. By the time Smith targeted the women profiled in the Love Fraud documentary, he'd been scamming for decades and was really good at it. This guy was a professional. The women never stood a chance. So next week is the final episode of Love Fraud on Showtime. I'm looking forward to seeing what happens next. So let's take a look and see what kind of questions we may have today. Okay, CC says, dysfunctional upbringing expands the gamut. Doesn't necessarily mean alcoholism, physical abuse. My ex's parents were hoarders. This is true. There are multiple types of abuse, and what really happens in a lot of these families is that there's just this air of uncertainty and an air of anxiety and fear because the kids don't learn that they can rely on their parents, a disordered parent at any rate. They always need to be concerned about whether or not he or she, the mother or father, is going to fly off the handle. There could be other disordered people because this is genetic, it runs in families, so that there may be other people in the extended family who are also disordered. I've spoken with people who, once they realized what a psychopath or sociopath was, they looked around and realized that the family is infested with them. So all of this creates a very difficult environment for anybody to grow up in. Okay, so CC is me asked, Donna, can I be born with a genetic disposition and still not act on dysfunction? One of the things about these disorders is that they are not all the same. Psychopathy and antisocial personality disorder are both a syndrome and a continuum. And what that means is that as a syndrome, it's a collection of different traits and behaviors. And somebody can exhibit any of the traits or behaviors to greater or lesser degrees. That's what a continuum means. So what happens is you have this whole matrix of behaviors and levels of behavior and levels of disorder. So essentially, they're not all the same, and depending on which traits of disorder a person may have and how disordered he is or she is, what the level of disorder is, it is possible to not act on dysfunction. In fact, we actually see this all the time, even in the Lovefraud documentary show. Richard Scott Smith was wonderful. When he first targeted somebody, he told them how wonderful they were, and all of us who have been involved in these situations know what this is like. The person showers us with affection. They tell us how wonderful we are. They give us presents. They give us gifts. They certainly don't engage in bad behavior because they're not stupid. They know if they show their disorder right away, then we're going to run. But they don't do that. They wait until we're hooked, and then they start to press for whatever it is that they may want. So the answer is that psychopaths and antisocials can certainly control their disorder and not engage in dysfunctional behavior when it suits them, at least until they think they've got a good grip on somebody and that the person will tolerate whatever it is that they're trying to get from them. Also, there are some who have a level of awareness about the fact that they may have this disorder, but they can control their behavior. Like, for example, not all psychopaths engage in outright criminal behavior. So it is possible to not act in a dysfunctional way, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the person has the ability to love or has the ability to show and feel empathy. So, there's a difference between what the person is and the behavior that they exhibit. So, yes, it is certainly possible for someone to be disordered and not engage in outright dysfunctional behavior. Okay. So are all the people on the show real people? I'm sure they are. I'm absolutely sure they are. There are no actors. They're telling the truth. I mean, this is what happened to them. I don't know any of them personally, but I've collected 10,000 cases, and I've heard stories like this multiple times. So everything that we're seeing on this show, I have definitely seen in other situations, and people have told me. So I do not doubt for a minute that everything that is transpiring on this show is exactly what happened. Okay, so that appears to be all of the questions that we have for today. And as I said, the last episode of the Lovefraud Show will be on this coming Sunday, and we'll wrap it up then, talk about what happens in the end, which I don't know, but we will find out, and see what other messages we can glean from seeing this on TV. So thank you all very much, and we'll see you next Tuesday at 8 o'clock Eastern Time. Oh, one more question here. Sammy says, where can I catch the show? Is this a series? If so, how many have I missed? Well, Sammy, the show is on the tape on Showtime. You may also be able to see it on their website, showtime.com, I guess it is. And there are 4 episodes altogether, and the first 3 have aired. So anyway, yes, we will talk about this next week. Bye-bye, everyone.